achieved.
I applaud Bellator in one sense, as they are doing their best to offer an alternative to both the MMA fans of the world and the participants, the fighters themselves, and the Benson Hendersons and the Josh Thompsons and the Phil Davises that opt to go to Bellator and compete and leave the UFC. At the same time, watching what transpired at the last Bellator show in the main event and co-main event, and I shake my head and say, what are they doing? They're trying to legitimize themselves, or they are a legitimate promotion, and yet they're putting on these two freak show fights and overshadowing the talent they do have. They have some excellent fighters, and there's a lot of good fights they can make, and yet we're seeing Kimbo Slice and Dada 5000 nearly have heart attacks inside the cage, and in just a deplorable display of, I don't want to call it mixed martial arts, backyard brawling. I don't know. And then, of course, we get Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie in the main event. And yes, Kenny got kneed in the groin, and that led to the finish. But honestly, who cares? Like, it's sad. And yet there are some people who look at that and go, "Oh, that's awesome, great." And then those same people look at women's MMA and laugh and say, make this comment and that comment. And it makes me wonder, I don't know, why do they not appreciate actual talent versus fights that just should not be taking place? That's what they want to see. Either way, Bellator, they need to stop that. They need to stop that. And see, people will point at the UFC and say, well, they brought Brock Lesnar in and they brought James Toney. Those guys had combat background. Absolutely. They had some kind of background. And yes, that's the whole debate with CM Punk. And I'm very leery about that scenario with him, and if he ever actually fights in the UFC. Either way, what Bellator did, they should never do again. And talking about what happened to Dada 5000 after that fight is frightening, and could have happened to a guy like Ken Shamrock or Royce Gracie had that fight been more strenuous than it was, and that's a frightening situation. Either way, stop that crap and appreciate the talent you do have. Please, Bellator, Scott Coker, I'm begging you. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. And on this episode of the show, we're bringing in the upcoming UFC Fight Night 84 event, which will take place on February 27th from London, England. It is an afternoon event, at least in my neck of the woods. I'll be breaking down the 4 main card fights, including the huge middleweight matchup between the former champion Anderson Silva and UK's own Michael the Count Bisping. Now, as far as the bet packs are concerned, the last show I didn't do very well. I went 6-7. I struggled. I mounted a comeback at the end, but I had a couple fights. The Marion Renault fight was absolutely dog shit, garbage decision, and it didn't go my way the way I was hoping it would. There were a couple disappointing upsets. Nonetheless, the bet packs, the final one will be for sale for this subscription. I'm also looking at setting up a subscription where you can get this one plus the next 7 for, I don't know, so it'd be 8 bet packs for like $65 or something like that. Definitely check the bet shop for whatever discount I do make available. I'm doing my best. These shows I traditionally don't do very well at. For some reason, afternoon shows, whether it be in Europe or Korea, South Korea or Japan or Australia, I seem to struggle with. So I've watched a ton of videos, and that's why it's taking me a little bit longer to get this show out, and I'm doing my best to overcome those slumps and trying to consistently put together solid efforts. Nonetheless, that's enough for me. Let's get to that first of 4 main card predictions. The first fight on the main card takes place in the UFC Bantamweight division as the number 15th ranked fighter in the division, Francisco Cisco Rivera, 11 wins, 5 losses, and 1 no contest, takes on Brad One Punch Pickett with a record of 25 wins and 11 losses. Now, what we have here is a battle of 2 veteran fighters in low spots in their career looking to get things back going in the right direction. Rivera has lost 3 of his last 4. Pickett has lost 3 in a row and has 2 wins and 5 losses over his last 7 fights, including a loss in his return to bantamweight. Now, Rivera, he formerly fought at flyweight, an experiment that did not go well. Rivera is stepping in to replace Henry Baronis on just over 1 month's notice. He is coming off a brutal fight in which he was dropped and submitted by John Lineker. And for Brad Pickett, he's coming off the second knockout loss of his career against Thomas Almeida, which was an absolute doozy of a fight as well. Check those both out. Physically, Rivera 2 inches taller. He'll have a 2-inch reach advantage, and he is, I wrote years younger. He's a couple years younger than Brad Pickett. I believe it's 4, but I'm not 100% sure. Looking at their numbers, Rivera 8 wins by knockout. He is 0-3 in fights ended by submission, 3-1 on the scorecards. He has 1 knockout loss on his career. For Brad Pickett, 7 wins by knockout, 10-4 in fights ended by submission, 7-5 on the scorecards. And keep in mind, he is fighting at home. He will have the crowd behind him. That's certainly a positive for One Punch. Now, Rivera, in his last fight against John Lineker, he was drawn into a slugfest against a guy who has a good chin and brutal power. It was a major mistake on his part, and it cost him, like I said, hurt and submitted. We also saw him he's been hurt in other fights. He got dropped by Takeya Mizugaki, and Edwin Figueroa actually dropped him in that fight as well. But for Brad Pickett, he's had multiple occasions where he's been tagged in fights and dropped. Henan Barrow did it. Eddie Wineland hurt him. Mayday McDonald did it. And, of course, Thomas Almeida. All were able to hurt him. He's durable, but he is aging. We wonder at what point will that no longer be the case anymore. Obviously, last fight was a brutal finish. Francisco Rivera, he's a Muay Thai striker, throws lots of kicks, elbows, keeps his hands up, chambers them very nicely, nice left jab, straight right, some hard leg kicks when he opts to use them. When he fought Edwin Figueroa, he does have knockout power, but when he fought Figueroa, he beat him because of his cardio and technical advantage, and that's where it led to him to the victory. It was superior cardio, Figueroa, deplorable cardio. When he took out Alex Caceres, one of his only win in his last 4, he dropped him with a big left hook and finished him very quickly. Some of the negative things about Rivera against he was getting hurt by Figueroa. He's getting caught in big flurries. He was dropped with a left hook in that fight. He keeps his head on the center line. It's right there to be hit all the time. When Mizugaki caught him, he landed a couple big short right hands. Not big wind-up, nothing with significant power, but it did put him down. Another thing with Rivera, he tends to get fired up and very emotional in fights, especially if he gets tagged, and he looks to get it back, and it will also cost his cardio in longer fights. For Brad Pickett, he's a boxing-based fighter. He uses a lot of feints, a lot of head movement to get on the inside. He's a pressure fighter as well. I love the way he starts low and rises up with his combinations. He changes levels, will go to the body. It's harder to defend because you're constantly changing where your line of sight to try and pick up where he's coming from. The one thing I don't like is he tends, though, to pause when he does duck down, when he isn't fluidly attacking, and he becomes hittable in that point, and guys can tag him in that situation. Now, as I said, hands up, chin tuck, shoulder, shielding that chin. When he KO'd Yves Jaboué, hit a really hard uppercut. He will rip to the body as well. He rocked Almeida with a beautiful left hook, which is also a very effective weapon he will throw. A couple of things, though, when he fought Eddie Wineland, he had a lot of trouble with the reach of Eddie Wineland. He had a lot of trouble with the speed of McDonald, and both of those individuals were more impactful. And I would give Rivera the overall power edge in this fight. Additionally, Pickett does throw some looping punches where straighter, crisper strikes like Rivera will throw could beat him to the mark. I like what Pickett does, though, overall. He needs to jab his way into range. Doesn't throw a ton of kicks. I'd like to see a few more low kicks incorporated. He could look to use his wrestling here. He had 4 takedowns against Mike Easton and Neil Seery, where he added more dimensions to his game and was far more effective. Rivera has good takedown defense. He gets his hips back. He's a decent scrambler, but he can be taken down. He's been subbed multiple times, and he can be beaten by just being put on his back. I think Pickett should just shoot anyway to keep Rivera guessing, make him work hard, possibly slow him down in that situation. Rivera overall has the more diverse striking attack. He hits harder and he has a slight reach advantage, but Pickett has a full camp behind him. He is fighting at home. I think he'll have a slight speed advantage. I also think his cardio is better. We saw the boxing of Figueroa giving Rivera trouble, and then Pickett's going to strike in a more technical but still very similar style. I like the way he changes levels. I don't like the way Rivera is there to be hit and his head is on the center line. I said Figueroa caught him several times but couldn't keep the pressure up, couldn't maintain it. Pickett, I believe, will, but Pickett has to avoid getting tagged. He can't headhunt. He has to remain diverse. I see Pickett clipping Rivera and either finishing him on the mat with strikes or possibly a sub, but my prediction is Brad Pickett to defeat Francisco Rivera by TKO. Fight number 2 in the main card takes place in the welterweight division as England's Tom Breese, undefeated at 9-0, takes on Japan's Keita Nakamura with a current record of 31 wins, 6 losses, 2 draws, and 1 no contest. What we have here is a matchup of this undefeated youth who's on the rise against a long-established veteran who's having kind of a resurgence. Breese, 6 first-round finishes overall, including 2 in the UFC. All 9 of his victories have come inside the distance. He's coming off back-to-back knockout victories after submitting 6 of his first 7 opponents, so he's really found his striking and power edge. For Nakamura, very impressive finishing rate as well. 23 career finishes and 31 career victories. 17 first-round victories. He comes from a BJJ and judo background. Of his, he has 15 rear naked choke submissions, which is crazy. I think he has 17 overall submissions, 15 by rear naked choke, including his re-debut in the UFC. And one thing interesting though with Breese though is Breese has won 4 of his 6 submissions by rear naked choke as well. So that's worth keeping an eye on. Now, looking at Breese physically, he's a massive welterweight, 6'3". He will be 4 inches taller than his opponent. They have the identical same reach, which I find hard to believe considering how big Breese is. He is 7 years younger, and keep in mind he's also training at TriStar and working with an elite welterweight in Rory McDonald. So that is definitely a camp where this guy is going to learn and grow a lot in. For Nakamura, he's a grappling-based fighter, but he's capable of striking. He comes forward with some aggressive strikes and throws some decent straight punches. He dropped his last opponent with a nice short left hook. He has a pretty good right hook as well. He countered Lee when he was coming forward. He lands some kicks, but traditionally most of what he throws are hard single strikes. He doesn't have the fastest hands, and the big thing with him, like we just talked about with Rivera in the last fight, he tends to leave his head in the same place when he's striking, and his opponents are able to figure that out, time, counter it, and they know where he is when they need to throw strikes. And a lot of the strikes that Li Jingliang was throwing in his last fight were getting through and hurting him, especially in the second round. They were getting through his guard and blasting him. He was also getting outworked in that last fight. He got cracked with a ton of jabs to the face and body. He was waiting on his opponent, and he had slowed down significantly. He was getting hit to the body a lot, and that probably hurt his cardio and his ability to push the pace and fight back. When he is on the mat, he has pretty solid top control, but we saw in that first round he did not do a lot from top position once he got there and eventually got stood up. In the finishing moments of that fight, didn't set up his takedown overly effectively. He was able to hit a switch when his opponent tried to sprawl to the takedown attempt and jump right on that rear naked choke. That is one thing. He has a lethal back mount. So if he gets there, like I said, Breese will be in all sorts of trouble. Now for Tom Breese, he had some issues. I talked about this in his last fight with Cathal Pendred, and unfortunately I picked Cathal and I was totally incorrect in that matchup. Breese had some issues in his last pre-UFC fight with getting taken down and clinched and pinned on the cage for prolonged periods of time. He had a lot of success in that fight countering takedowns in the top position. He showed some very strong hips. But against Nakamura, you're playing into his strongest area, and you want to avoid that at all costs. What he does like to do, he likes to initiate the clinch if possible. Again, that could be a mistake here. He does have some nice trips in the clinch. But what I do like what he does in that tight position is the knees. He likes to control his opponent's head and drive knees into their body, and he turns them over so effectively. They're incredibly sharp. He'll also throw a nice step knee at range. And again, we saw with Nakamura in his last fight, he got tagged to the body a couple times, and it really changed the complexion of that fight, at least in the second round, and that could happen here as well. Breese also offers a very strong kicking game from range, lots of hard low kicks. He has some big head kicks. He hurt Pendred with a very nasty body kick, which again can change the fight in an instant. With his hands, straight left, right jab, dropped Luis Dutra with a brutal straight left, dropped Pendred with a huge straight left as well, which was a counter strike. I love the way he steps back when his opponent's engaging and fires that left hand. It's always cocked, always ready to go. It's very long, it's very hard. He has very fast hands for a big man. He also can be very effective when he pressures and cuts off the cage, yet he's incredibly patient and a measured fighter. I really like what I've seen out of this young man over his last 2 fights. He has the size advantage, he has the speed advantage here. I think he should be able to snipe with his right jab and come with that straight left, counter when Nakamura tries to come forward, counter strike him. As I said, Nakamura doesn't move his head enough. He's going to be there to be hit. He's going to get hit whether he has his guard up or not. Look for Breese to target the body with knees, similar to what Li Jingliang did against Nakamura, take his gas tank away. I think the long strikes and the kicks are going to force Nakamura to work on the outside, make him shoot from long distances, get desperate, get put in some bad positions. Again, he has to be careful tying up with a very gifted grappler. Big question if he gets dragged out of the first round, how does he perform? But my prediction is Tom Breese to defeat Keita Nakamura by TKO. In the co-main event of the evening, we had the first of two main card middleweight bouts as the former Strikeforce light heavyweight champion and the 9th-ranked middleweight in the UFC, Gegard Mousasi, 37 wins, 6 losses, and 2 draws, takes on the 10th-ranked fighter in the division, former UFC middleweight title challenger, Thales Leites of Brazil, with a record of 25 wins and 5 defeats. What we have here is a pair of middleweights who had a lot of momentum, or at least had, were going in the right direction, but they kind of stalled out in their last fight. Leites had an 8-fight winning streak and in a split decision loss in Scotland against Michael Bisping. For Mousasi, he had back-to-back wins going for him. Just 2 losses in his last 21 fights before getting TKO'd by Uriah Hall in unfortunate and very impressive fashion for Uriah. For Mousasi, he's a black belt in judo, 19 wins by knockout, 12 submission wins, so he knows how to stop opponents. 6-2 on the scorecards. He has been submitted 3 times in his career, including the loss to Jacare Souza. For Leites, a BJJ black belt, 4 wins by knockout, 14 submission wins, 7-4 in decisions. He has been submitted himself once, but he got that back in a couple fights after that occurred. For Mousasi, 1 inch taller, 2 inch reach advantage. For Leites, though, Gegard is the younger man by 4 years. Now, big numbers when I was looking through the fight metric breakdown of this card. The big numbers that stand out to me right off the bat: Mousasi averages 3.42 strikes landed per minute. That's 1.25 more than Thales Leites averages. So he has an obviously offensive advantage there as far as his output is concerned. At the same time, though, his defense is that much better as he gets hit 1.76 times less per minute. So when you equate those numbers together, that's a big advantage if he can consistently hold those numbers over a 3-round fight, which I believe he can. Leites, though, he's improved his striking significantly. He has pretty heavy hands, throws a left jab, wings an overhand right. He tries to back up his opponent to the cage before letting go of his hands, which makes him the most effective because they cannot back away. Against Francis Carmont, he hit him with a right hand and swarmed him. He had a couple of big right hands to stop Trevor Smith, both along the cage, same scenario. He has, as I said, big success when he cuts off his opponent and unloads. He has some nice hard low kicks. Counter left hook is also an effective weapon that he can deploy. He tends to attack in bursts with prolonged periods of inactivity where he'll throw strikes here and there, and then boom, he comes forward, tries to throw a big flurry and do damage, and then he backs off again. He does have a tendency to lunge forward at times when he's attacking, leaves his chin open, can overextend, and a quality striker like a Mousasi could certainly capitalize on that. When he fought Tim Boetsch, he had some trouble with the power and the pressure of Boetsch, and Boetsch hurt him a couple of times and really backed him off, and that was kind of eye-opening. He rallied and showed a lot of heart and picked up the victory, but at least showed some of the issues he could definitely experience against a guy who hits hard. Now for Mousasi, he's coming off the first knockout of his career. He's known for having a granite chin. How does that affect him? That's a great question. We'll have to see. We've never had this scenario before, and he hasn't, and neither have we. Throws a nice left jab, very hard body kicks, straight right hand, also right hook can be very effective as well. And when he fought a lot of his opponents that he had a lot of success against, even in the Machida fight, he had his most success when he pushed forward and engaged. He tends a little bit to be measured and calculated almost to a point of complacency where he sits back and doesn't do enough. But he does one thing I do like, and I think that will show up here. He moves away when he's being pressured very nicely, and he can strike moving backwards. He can, here comes his opponent. He anticipates. He sees where they're going to attack. He moves out of the way, and then he fires a counter strike. Again, against Machida, he had trouble pulling the trigger again, but Machida's a different bag of bolts. He's not what we're dealing with here as far as Thales Leites is concerned. Now, the big question mark is the takedown game. We've seen Mousasi both have success with his takedowns and them ultimately cost him his ability to stay off his back. He showed good takedown defense early against Jacare Souza, landed some big elbows on the attempt, but he eventually got taken down. For Leites, he was taken down by Michael Bisping, but he reversed and showed how crafty he is on the ground. Similar situation against Tim Boetsch. Got the better of the mat game in that when they did hit the floor. For Mousasi, he's capable of scoring takedowns and grinding out top position. We've seen him do that against Costa Philippou, but again, he's taking this fight into Thales Leites' realm of dominance. Leites had 8 takedowns in his wins over Ed Herman and Tom Watson. He has scored none since, some of them because the fights were so quick, but I think he's fallen in love with his striking. He wasn't going for enough takedowns against Michael Bisping, possibly because he was looking to conserve his energy, but nonetheless, it's an aspect of his game that he has foregone a little bit of late. Again, big question, how does Mousasi respond from getting knocked out? I think he comes out and I think he shakes it off. He's a veteran fighter with a lot of experience. I think he'll be fine. I think he should have good enough takedown defense to persuade Leites to abandon the takedown game eventually. I think Mousasi's more consistent with his striking and even flow as opposed to those bursts. I think that shows up. He should be able to avoid the majority of what Leites throws at him, land counter strikes, and make him pay for jumping in. I think he'll land while he's backing up. He has the power to back him off. He can't be too calculated and sit back and let Leites continually be the man pushing forward, but my prediction is Gegard Mousasi to defeat Thales Leites by decision. Moving now to the main event of the evening, we stay in the same division, the middleweight division, as the former champion and pound-for-pound greatest fighter on the planet at one point in time, the 7th-ranked fighter in the middleweight division, Anderson the Spider Silva, with a record of 34 wins and 6 losses, takes on the UK's own 6th-ranked fighter in the division, Michael the Count Bisping, with a record of 28 wins and 7 defeats. Now, Silva is returning after a 13-month layoff due to a suspension. The last time he fought followed a 14-month layoff, so he's been very inactive, and he has not won a fight since 2012 when he defeated Stephan Bonner at light heavyweight in Brazil. So that's how long it's been since we've seen Anderson Silva actually get a win, even though he did defeat Nick Diaz until it was turned no contest, yada, yada, yada. Official win. For Bisping, he's been asking for this fight for a long time. Unfortunately for him, he was asking for it before when the title would have been on the line. Here, it's not there, but it's certainly a win considering he's won 3 of 4. It could get him closer to an opportunity to fight for the champion, a man who actually had a dominant win over Bisping, so it's very dicey. Hopefully he believes it can lead him to the promised land. Keep in mind here, Bisping has won all 16 professional fights that have taken place in the United Kingdom. Will he make it 17? Well, let's see if I think so or not. Not that that really matters. Physically, Silva 1 inch taller, 5 inch reach advantage, and he is the younger man by 4 years. Now, Silva, he had that aura of invincibility. Fighters defeated before they get in there with him. Does it still exist after the 2 Weidman losses? Nick Diaz certainly did not play into it, but Nick is a whole different cat, so we kind of discredit that a little bit. Other thing is how motivated is Silva? He sounds like he wants his title back. We have a different champion, a man he's never fought before. That's certainly a challenge and something the UFC is probably looking at to set up if Rockhold retains his title in the rematch and things go from there. Bisping has had issues with being a bit of a slow starter. Keep that in mind as well. He has also had bigger issues when facing dangerous power strikers. He's a bit chinny. We've seen him get hurt in multiple fights, knocked out a couple of times, I believe, yes. When he fought Luke Rockhold, when he fought Dan Henderson, when he fought Vitor Belfort, he struggled to sit down in his punches. He seemed to be waiting to get hit and not doing his thing. He was thrown off by what they had to offer, and that really cost him, and ultimately he lost all 3 of those fights, all by some form of violent stoppage. For Bisping, his biggest weapon is his cardio, but the question here is, can he consistently push the pace and outland Silva for 5 rounds, or at least 3 rounds, without getting tagged and hurt? Big question. Additionally, I don't think his cardio is what it used to be. I love Michael Bisping as a fighter, but his cardio is not what it used to be. He seems to have he will slow down at times, and that's certainly, he's getting older, and that happens. Keep in mind as well, Michael Bisping is at his best when he is pushing the pace, attacking, and engaging his opponent. Anderson Silva is at his best when his opponent is leading the dance and allows Anderson to sit back, measure them, look for openings, and counter-strike. That does not bode well for Bisping. We saw him have a lot of trouble when Leites was able to engage and attack him, backed him up, hurt him a couple of times, and really backed him off. Silva appeared to still have the hand speed when he fought Nick Diaz and was able to land several shots against Nick, but he was getting hit a lot. And that question still remains. He's always been known for having a very good chin. Nick, though, not known for having massive power. He's more of that decimation by accumulation, or whatever, damage by accumulation, if you want. That's kind of the way Michael Bisping is. I'd say Bisping has a little bit more power than Nick Diaz. Nonetheless, I say that a lot. I should stop saying that at all. Either way, can Bisping hurt Anderson? That's another big question. When we saw Diaz, he stood with Anderson. He clowned a bit. He didn't come forward and attack in the traditional sense. He wasn't intimidated, and that's something that bode well for Nick and probably allowed him to go the 5 full rounds, despite the fact he got hurt. He was bloodied up in that matchup. I just don't see Michael Bisping being able to land with consistency. In fact, I kind of see him working around the outside, looking very gun-shy, trying to find openings that aren't there, and almost, again, waiting on his opponent to land that big strike and back him off. I think Anderson has way too many weapons. I think he'll be able to anticipate and counter what Bisping offers. The reach and the kicking game of Anderson Silva is going to force Bisping to fight on the outside against a 5-inch reach advantage, plus the legs make it longer. They're going to be able to force it. It's going to force him to fight on the outside. Watch for Anderson Silva to counter strike when Bisping comes in and lands low kicks, and there's going to be a shot right there to snipe with his right or his left. Bisping was getting tagged several times by Leites when he was going to throw too many of the same strikes in a row. I think we'll see him do something like that similar here. When Bisping does get hit, he tends to go into a defensive shell, backs up, and I think Silva will come forward. He could look for that tie clinch, knees to the body, throws that nice jumping knee to the body that put Bonner down. Either way, I think Silva eventually catches him, and my prediction is Anderson Silva to defeat Michael Bisping by TKO. So those are my 5 main card predictions for the upcoming UFC Fight Night 84 event. Obviously, buy the bet packs if you're interested. If you're not, by all means, enjoy everything else my site has to offer. There's tons of fantasy MMA information available on my site, whether you're looking to do DraftKings or you're looking to bet on the card, or you just want to have an idea of who might win a matchup to make a $5 bet with your buddy or try and look smart at the bar. It all works, ladies and gentlemen. You can follow me on Twitter. I try my best to tweet during the events. Sometimes it just doesn't work out with what's going on in my household at the time of the show. I'm trying to get settled down, and then, whatever. I do my best. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on the website. And just generally speaking, thanks for tuning in. I always appreciate you guys, and I want to go to bed. It's awful late here, so I'll talk to you soon. Big fight around the corner. Conor McGregor, Rafael dos Anjos, Holly Holm, Miesha Tate. Very much looking forward to it. Talk to you soon, guys. Bye-bye.